Hey everybody, welcome back into the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. It was practice number 2 for Ohio State in spring ball. This is practice report number 2, brought to you by Byers Auto. That is Spencer Holbrook, Tim May, Jeremy Birmingham. I am Austin Ward. The wide receivers and the running backs. Spent a lot of time with the assembled media this morning in here, and I think, like my takeaway on Tuesday, those units are pretty good.
They're good, but the running back group, as we see it today, you realize it's sort of thin, and that's what you don't really want in the spring, because you want these guys to get a lot of carries and you want them to work on stuff. But I asked Travion Henderson, are they going to let you get hit this spring? He said, nope. I mean, we only got 3 running backs. We can't afford to have someone get hurt. And you talk to these kids about what they're expecting this spring, and especially for the running game with the new offensive line, there's things that are going to be changing. And I think it would be helpful for Ohio State to have an extra body or two. I mean, we have Xavier Johnson out here who can do multiple things. He's played on both those units before, but certainly that's my biggest takeaway, is that you don't really think about how thin they are. They will get down Hayden come June, but at this point there's only 3 scholarship running backs.
And that third guy, Evan Pryor, didn't get many of those touches last year. Got to a cup of coffees out there and got his feet wet, but wound up with a redshirt year that he didn't feel like he was truly expecting. He thought he would play more, so not that he was frustrated, it was just the way that it worked out for Ohio State last year. But he wants to play more, and he's going to, if Travion Henderson can't be touched and Mayan Williams has some proven production, probably a lot of work for Evan Pryor to get out there. And he did well in the winter workouts, added about 10 pounds of muscle, he said. Certainly looks the part. We all noticed him on the field on Tuesday flying around, and maybe see him taking some of those touches and getting maybe a little bit of a mini Curtis Samuel role for this team.
What's kind of crazy to me is, like, Travion Henderson obviously didn't lose any confidence from last year to this year because he had 1,000 yards. Evan Pryor redshirted, had to sit and watch the entire season, and came out even more confident this spring than when we talked to him for the first time last spring. And that tells you a lot about what his mindset is and the way that he approaches everything. He's a really confident guy. He knows his ability. He knows what he can do. Last year he called himself a home run hitter. I don't know exactly what he would describe himself as now. Maybe he's a more complete back, but you've got to be impressed with the way he looks and the way that he's being talked about right now by everyone around him. You just know that something's, coming soon for Evan Pryor. I think this is a huge spring for him, and he proved that, he can handle the media. He can handle, a new workload maybe this spring, like you said. I'm expecting big things from him in the next, 6 weeks.
Yeah, I'd call him an inside the park home run hitter kind of guy, because he's that fast. I mean, basically when he gets out in the open field, and like he talked about, the biggest thing last year was not pressing, especially early in practices and stuff, which kind of hurt him. And then he backed off of that a little bit, got a little bit more patience, for want of another term. But the old saying of pair and a spare. Kevin Wilson said everything but that the other day when we were talking to him about the running back situation. And it's an interesting spring, as Berm just brought up, because you only got 3 scholarship running backs, and you want all of these guys to step up and like you said, feel better, maybe in a little bit of a scheme change or whatever they're doing up front. But you don't want any of these guys walking out of here banged up at the end of spring, because you can't afford it.
It's an interesting dynamic with that backfield, because that, Travion Henderson has Heisman Trophy caliber potential in the backfield. Mayan Williams, we've seen what he can do when he's fully healthy and rolling, and that started in the opener last year against Minnesota, and we had got a taste of what Evan Pryor can do. And Ryan Day and Kevin Wilson both want that powerful rushing attack and the ability to get short yards they didn't get a year ago. But you also have so many weapons, and you could supplement that. Jackson Smith and Jigba has lined up in the backfield. We've seen already just through 2 practices, Emeka Egbuka, taking some of those jet sweeps. Like, there's going to be a big part of that for this offense, that you're so talented at wide receiver that's probably going to bleed over in some respects to the rushing attack. But again, it all goes back to that one part. If it's 3rd and 2, somebody's got to go get that.
Mm-hmm. Now, for me, as you watch today, and again, we didn't get to see practice at all, so you don't know exactly what they're doing. But I think the interesting thing, especially as we move into
what are they doing out there
in the wide receiver discussion, is we talked to Emeka Egbuka, Marvin Harrison, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Julian Fleming, Cameron Babb, and Jackson. He's a known entity. You know exactly what he is. He's the best receiver in the country. The younger guys, Emeka Egbuka and Marvin Harrison, really don't have anything to prove. I mean, they did a great job in their time last year, really came out at the end of the year. They're expected to be that next wave, but it's Julian Fleming and Cameron Babb who will take this receiver core and make it the best in the country. or make it just the best in the Big Ten. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think if you get what you can get out of Fleming and Babb, if they're both able to stay healthy, if you just look at those two guys, they are a different type of athlete. They're a different type of beast. Julian Fleming told me that Cameron Babb, after 4 ACL surgeries in the last 5 years, is running a 4.3. And
I believe that.
if you look at him, it's pretty hard not to. The kid is an absolute freak. And so for him to be able to get out here and do some reps, Julian Fleming, healthy, said, he said he's just not concerned with limits at this point. He's just going to push it as hard as he can and force himself to go beyond what people think. He said he's done listening to the outside noise. He's not worried about expectations. It's about him and what he wants to give his teammates. And those two guys, to me, take what's probably the most talented top 3 receivers in the country and make it the best class in the country by a wide
But
margin.
how could either one of those guys not have a little bit of a thing in their mind about what's next, meaning, what's going to pop next physically
you
for
have
them?
to. I mean, that's part of being a human.
Yeah, and getting past that is their big chore. But it's like we were talking. You're talking about Cameron Babb being, maybe even faster than he was. I mean, remember Joey Galloway got a major knee injury. Next thing you know, he's running faster than he ever ran. Sometimes, as the old saying goes, I was talking with a medical guy about that the other day. You get in there and tighten some things up, and suddenly you've got strength you didn't have before.
Doesn't it make you wonder if zombies are really fast?
Exactly. Well, no, they go the opposite.
Maybe that's why zombies are so fast.
They go the
They're just
opposite of getting
cadavers.
things tightened up, buddy. They go the opposite of that. But
Do they
but
still
no.
use cadavers for ACL?
But I agree with you. Now you're going off onto sighting there that I'm not even sure is on this train track. But the bottom line is I agree with you. What you said, these guys will make the difference on whether this core is considered the same as it was a year ago. Because you knew on the sighting, staying with that analogy, that you had Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Egbuka sitting there.
Yep.
Wow, and Jaden Ballard. I mean, there's a guy to keep your eye on.
Yeah, it makes me happy that you guys allow me to start talking about Jaden Ballard, because I asked Xavier Johnson what the difference, he's one of the leaders of the room now, what the difference is between Jaden Ballard last year and this year. He said that he's bought in. So I asked Jaden about it, and he said, yeah, I feel way different right now. Walking around this building, I think he's starting to come out of that shell. Still doesn't really like to talk. He's a pretty quiet guy. You know that better than anybody, Byrne, but
I don't. I've never talked to him.
that's exactly right. But he seems like the kind of guy who can really elevate this room even more. Because if you get a true deep threat, he got the Devin Smith question today. I think he handled him pretty well. It's a pretty apt comparison, even down to the number. He knows what that expectation is. And I think that if he can bring that to this offense, you're talking about a whole different level, even beyond, what Jackson and all of those guys can bring to this. Cameron Babb is going to be huge. Julian Fleming is going to be huge in this. But I think almost like the secret weapon heading into this spring is Jaden Ballard. And if he continues to gain that buzz, it's not going to be a secret for much longer.
But how can Austin, I'll just ask you, if Jaden Ballard becomes that guy, something went terribly wrong for other people, or something went so right for him that it's a leap we've maybe never seen a guy make from year 1 to year 2.
I don't think that that's out of the realm of possibility for Jaden Ballard, because I think there's this, assumption that because you have Emeka Egbuka and Marvin Harrison, that this other guy, he's the third best. Well, he's still, I don't know which service to use, dating back 2 years ago, but he's a top 100, top 150 player. He's an elite player. So it's not unheard of for somebody to go through 1 year.
He's a top 10 athlete in this building.
And to learn from Brian Hartline and to be in this offense that has proven time and time again that it knows how to scheme up fast guys and get them open down the field. That wouldn't surprise me. And I think that what you're talking about earlier with if this is the best overall unit in the country, I think it will be anyway, but it can be the best and the deepest if this is probably trending more towards the 6 wide receiver units of a couple years ago, where you can specialize a little bit more. Jackson Smith and Jigba, you don't ever want to take him off the field. But if you start bunching it up a little bit, and Marvin Harrison and Julian Fleming and Emeka Egbuka can all give you a little something differently athletically, plus Jaden Ballard stretching the field, and whatever Cam Babb becomes, it's not a problem to play 6 when they're all very, very good.
What's fascinating is because we saw Ohio State utilize Jackson Smith and Jigba in the backfield in the Rose Bowl and sort of that Deebo Samuel role, you could see a situation where all 6 of them are on the field at the same time. If you went 5 wide and you had...
You're going to play without a quarterback?
Yeah. I mean, why not?
Which one of them could throw
No,
the
I'm
ball?
saying like you could have all five. You could have five of those guys on
Everyone
the
would be a
field.
right tackle.
You could have five of those guys on the field
Yeah.
at the same time,
Right.
And allow yourself to really do a lot of different things with motions, and whether it's bringing Jackson out of the backfield, bringing him back in, moving Fleming down to almost like a tight end role. There's a lot of weapons, a lot of
We
options.
talked about that on my podcast the other day. I mean, that's it's like I said, one of the things I wish I'd seen last year was them putting 5 wides out there with a quarterback, and like you said, then the team's got to get to C.J. Stroud. If they don't, somebody's going to be
Well,
wide
Kevin
open.
Wilson also quickly said
Exactly.
that would be a problem if Ohio State has to do that and can't play tight end.
Well, yeah, but I'm saying you do it one time just for the fun of it.
We
You
got
do
that
it
one
like 10
poster
play.
on the one subscriber on the Letterman Lounge forum who's constantly asking us to press for a 10 personnel to be the only way Ohio State goes from here on out. I don't think that's going to happen, but certainly they have the weapons to do it.
One of the other wrinkles of this offense that I thought was interesting today is that TreVeyon Henderson talked a lot about pass blocking and how he was always a willing pass blocker. He didn't have to do it in high school because he was part of the route concept. He was getting the ball and running 70 yards for a touchdown. Like, it was never in the cards for him to be a pass blocker. He was a really good pass protector last year for C.J. Stroud. When he was on the field and he was asked to pass protect, there were times where he was one of the best blockers, in the box there. And
I don't think Tony Alford will agree with
No,
that
no, I
assessment.
Yeah. I thought he came on.
He certainly got better as the year went on, and I think he's going to continue to get better. But you could tell he brought it up today a couple different times. I think he's kind of put that on himself to get better in that area. There were times where you would see him, and you would see a guy who's willing to do it and who kind of didn't know what he was doing in it. And so I think that's where I get that is like, for somebody who didn't know what he was doing and never had to do it, I thought he did okay, but he has to get better, and I think he knows that.
The reason Ezekiel Elliott is regarded as the best running back in the history of Ohio State is not just because he was a great guy with the ball in his hands. Ezekiel Elliott never had to come off the field. He was a dominant pass protector at running back, which is something that doesn't happen often. That's something he's taken to the NFL because he worked his butt off to get great at it. And that's something for TreVeyon Henderson, all the comparisons we've seen over the years, last year in his recruitment, if he wants to be that type of player, he has to never come off the field. You can't forfeit your spot on the field on third and 5 for Master Teague. You know what I mean? You have to be able to be out there the entire time. Yeah. So if he's buying into that, it's just one of those things that elevates this offense even more.
Plus, Zeke was a great pass catcher. I mean, he was as consummate a back as you're ever going to find. And, I know Eddie George and Keith Byers and some of those guys would argue because they weren't used in the same way
but they were
as him. Huh?
But they'd be wrong.
I know. Well, whatever. But I when I'm sitting here, I'm just looking at this wide receiver core. I'm talking to Marvin Harrison Jr. today, and he hasn't put on necessarily more weight. He just looks like he has because he's been working the Mickey Marotti program. He's a much bigger, probably stronger, maybe even faster version of his dad, and the way he stepped up in the Rose Bowl, what he's carrying from that is like just a confidence factor that's through the roof.
He did appreciate the compliment from Berm the other day on social media, and I asked him about that, but he said the weight is basically the same.
Yeah.
The body fat has changed
It
dramatically.
looks significantly different.
He's carrying it very differently, and he acknowledged that. Like,
he actually texted me after that tweet on Tuesday where I was like, oh, yeesh. And he said, I've gotten faster too.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay.
Well, that's dangerous.
He can feel that, and he's confident in what Mickey Marotti has done to help him in this offseason. And it didn't mean that he needed to add 10 pounds like Evan Pryor did. He was already pretty successful in the Rose Bowl anyway. But
as I told him, he's more swole. He like that.
Yeah, he's sort of become the poster boy for this offseason without necessarily becoming much larger, because you saw all the Matt Drill photos with him 15 feet in the air and coming off the field on Tuesday with the guns popping. I mean, boy, when you just talk about fitting these pieces together, Brian Hartline's he's literally in a candy store back there.
It's just fascinating because you see these kids, and I mean, obviously I tend to look at things from a recruiting standpoint. Marvin Harrison, the knock on him coming out of St. Joe's Prep in Philadelphia was that he maybe wasn't the elite athlete that some of the other receivers in the country were, and that's a class that included Emeka Egbuka and Jaden Ballard. And then you see him now, 2 years, and like, you have to put a little investment into the futures when you're dealing with kids who have that sort of genealogy. You know what I mean? Like, let's, as a recruiting industry, folks, if you're listening, if someone's father is a Hall of Famer,
here we go. Yeah.
If someone's father is a Hall of Famer at the position that kid plays, and that kid happens to be 4 inches taller and 30 pounds heavier than said Hall of Fame father, there's a fairly good chance that kid's going to be pretty good.
Berm,
He
don't
and I
help,
talked- he
don't
and I
help out
talked
the
about that.
competition. Just
saying.
let your
There's
your
gonna
evaluations
be a chance
right.
that kid's pretty good.
He and
Let
I
them
talked
be
about
wrong,
that.
you be
Today.
right,
He and I talked about that today. I mean, he's 6'3.5", as he says, in between 3 and 4. And like I just said a while ago, whispered. I mean, the sky's the limit for this guy. I mean, it's unbelievable where he could be. And I just think, I thought he was going to be the most among the prolific pass catchers last year, but that was selling some guys short, obviously. But I think, wow, it's amazing that Marvin Harrison Jr. Is, like you said, a taller, stronger, faster version of his dad, who is in the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
I think it's kind of weird to think about last year with Chris and Garrett both on the roster, and we asked a very prominent member of the Ohio State offense, who's the best receiver on the team, and he didn't mention Chris, Garrett, Emeka, Marvin, any of those guys. Was Cameron Babb. So I don't know. There's a lot to think about with this wide receiver room. Marvin Harrison's going to be absolutely elite. I can't think of a guy with the higher upside, but then you look at Cameron Babb, a healthy Cameron Babb, even with the knee surgeries, and you just kind of wonder exactly what that means for this offense with Cam on the field.
Yeah, that would be a bonus, man.
My final thought, because I know we got to wrap this up. We could talk all day, people, is that we can talk about these guys, and we spend exactly 0 time talking about the best receiver in the country.
I was just going to say before you jumped in that I
Plenty
think
of time.
I just have some notion in my head that Jackson Smith-Njigba is good.
Yeah, I mean he's so good we don't even have to talk about him.
He's
because
inevitable.
He is inevitable.
Ooh.
He's big Thanos.
Well, there's already a Thanos on this team. What I
Thanos.
like about the conversation that you can have with Jackson Smith-Njigba now, as opposed to the last 2 years, everyone asks about, oh, do you want to play in the slot? Do you want to play outside? We've already seen evidence that he can do both.
Mm-hmm.
And then you add in the additional wrinkle. I said, well, how long had you guys been practicing you lining up in the backfield, and what does that change for you? And I said, well, put that in for Purdue, but he immediately motioned out. If you're running him out of the backfield and you have Marvin Harrison or the other 5 guys that we named, and you have to try and figure out a way to scheme up a defense to stop the best receiver in America, who's now coming out of the backfield where you normally want to cover that with a linebacker or safety, it's lights out. Now, Utah was shorthanded. I understand all that, and you can put that context into what happened to his amazing statistical performance there.
Ohio State was also shorthanded.
And it's fair as well. But that part where
Hands.
Ohio State and Brian Hartline and Kevin Wilson and Ryan Day know how good this guy is, and that they can line him up anywhere on the field, and he can do any assignment, any route from any spot. Like he's the guy, I think, who can elevate this when you have the supporting cast behind it.
Do you think
He's going to go higher than Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave?
Do you think Ryan Day and them get into a room some days and just sit in their swivel chairs and just swivel around and go, all right, what's the wildest thing we can do offensively? Where can we put guy? I mean, it almost like it's like mad scientist kind of stuff what they do offense. I mean, I'm talking about where they can go with this offense if they want to, if they have the time to do it.
But you've written about that before, Tim, and they don't want to do that.
I know.
I think with Jackson, this is more out of necessity because they know he's that good, and they have the creativity that you're talking about. If you're not just going to waste Jackson Smith-Njigba to get double teamed all game long.
But you got to be tempted. You've got to be tempted to like just throw some exotic stuff out there,
Well,
and,
I think,
and they never hurt. It's just amazing. I mean, like with Jack Smith-Njigba hiding in the backfield against Utah, that was genius. Only because you could not take him, even though you're Utah and you know he's catching all these passes. You still have to adjust to where he is at the moment, and it's like, to me, that was what the depth of this offense. That's where he wants to get to with his defense. He wants the defense to be feared in the same kind of way. And I don't know. I'm riffing here only because it always amazes me when I look at this talent, because I don't think we oversell the talent here. We were talking about the other day when I brought up, we gush too much, but
the
I don't think we
conversation
do.
at other positions may not be the same when you have the best wide receiver in America, the top, one of the most productive freshmen in Ohio State history, a top 10, candidate for the Heisman Trophy in year 2.
Yeah.
It's hard not to oversell.
I just think about how dramatically different the offense at Ohio State is from a decade ago.
Yeah.
Jackson Smith-Njigba had 2 games last year of 15 catches. In 2011, Ohio State's leading receiver had 13 catches for the season.
Wow.
That's what we're talking about.
I mean,
was it 13 or 12?
It was not a lot.
We'll text Stoney when we're
I mean, to think that we've come to that far in the last decade, and it is exciting, I think, for Buckeyes fans to just see it and be like, wow, this is crazy. But there's always that core of Ohio State football, which is if it's 3rd and 2, you got to run, and that's why you
But
have
you know
to
what? You
have
do.
Trayvon Henderson.
You do have to be able to do that. I mean, that's been proven a couple times.
Very last thought, if I can get one in. Last year I felt like the offense was historically good, and you don't want to put it bluntly, but Ohio State kind of wasted that offense by not winning a national championship. Like this offense is so good that if the defense gets even a sliver better, it should be a national championship. You can't continue to waste the offensive talent that you have by not winning national championships.
I'm
And
putting a
that's-
percentage on it. The
window
defense
doesn't
just
stay
has to
open
get
forever.
25% better. I've already put a percentage on it. And Ryan Day knows that.
Because I think the flip side of that is the offense is also going to get better.
Yeah.
I think the offensive line, even without their Munford and Nick Petit-Frere, with some new coaching and the personnel they have. Now we'll talk about that when they get out here. They're a little bit thinner, obviously, but
Yeah.
with a second-year quarterback, with a second-year for Travion Henderson, with that wide receiver group that we talked to today, and then you even lose Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, and this offense can be better. Like that's a mouthful, but I think it's really true, and we'll see. They have to stay healthy, of course. That's a big part. They're going to try and get through 13 more practices in spring before heading into the offseason. A lot more improvement for all those guys. Not a finished product yet, but we'll be covering them from start to finish as we always do at Lettermen Row. That's Spencer Holbrook, Tim May, Jeremy Birmingham. I am Austin Ward. This has been the Practice Report. As always, it's brought to you by Byers Auto. Stay with us for full coverage of the Buckeyes at lettermenrow.com.